Okay. So today we are going to start with Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Write it down. You should write down the name of the poet. Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who was born in 1772 and died in 1834, and his major work that published in 1817, which is known as Biographia Literaria. But before that, he came into life with his friend, where he published the famous book, Lyrical Ballads. He published the book with William Wordsworth. So this is Samuel Taylor Coleridge for you. So we're going to start with the rhyme of the ancient mariner. I expect that all of you, those who are in the class, making sure that you try to understand English and you try to grab the concept in English, since we have a foreign student in the classroom. So after giving the lecture in English, I'll be translating into Bangla for you again. But till then, have patience. Are you done with that? Write it down.
So the rhyme of the ancient
Mariner. Sorry, bad handwriting. M-A-R-I-N-E-R. Mariner. The ancient mariner. Lyrical ballads. C. আমার লেখা বুঝলে আপনারা ডাক্তারের লেখা বুঝতে পারবেন।
Biographia Literaria.
Biographia Literaria. Done? Okay. If you want to understand Coleridge, then it's not easy to understand Coleridge, because Coleridge was never been easy to understand. And why he wasn't being so easy to understand, there was a reason for that. And what was the reason? If I just write down here Coleridge, because this guy is not like normal human being. He's someone absolutely like, you can say that, beyond average. He was beyond average. He was not like the common people. He was very an uncommon guy, obviously. So if what he says in his book, Biographia Literaria, and he said some terms, said some, hey, give concentration. He said some rules. Said some rules. Now you must be thinking, have you ever asked the question, like, what is imagination actually? What is imagination? In Bangla we call it kalpana, but what is imagination actually? What is imagination? Now whatever the imagination is, let me just bring it for you and write it down very clearly. Let's do it.
Non-existent things.
Yes, probably. Let's do it in that, I think, let me do it from here. If I write down something like that, please write it down quick. Imagination. So Coleridge has to say you something very clearly. He says that it's not only imagination. Now he says that, come on, there is called primary imagination. He calls what? There is primary imagination. And he says that it's not the end of imagination. He says that, come on, there is also secondary imagination. Done? And he says that, wait a minute, it's not the end of the things. He says that, well, if it's the imagination, then what about this one? We call it like, we all. What's that?
Fancy.
And what's this actually? And if I say that, this word, something like that, right? So now, what's the difference between that imagination, fancy, primary imagination, secondary imagination? Now, if I want to make you understand very easily, just try to be with me. Primary imagination is something, just try to get the idea. primary imagination is something that we use our five senses to understand it. How many senses we use it? Five senses to understand it. And you can feel it, you can imagine with your five senses. Like what are the five senses? Like you take the smell with the nose, you feel with the hand, you taste with your tongue, then you see and you hear. 5, done? And there is another sense, it's called what? Sixth sense. And the secondary imagination that deals with common sense is not common at all. Sixth sense. It's called what? Sixth sense. What is the sixth sense? It's the sense. It's the sense. Sixth sense is the sense that, you know, is the most powerful senses human being can have. And with these senses, you can assume, you can imagine, and if you feel that, like, you can also be a transcendentalist with that sixth sense. Clear?
Yes.
And now if I just make it more clear, primary imagination deals with creative things, write it down. With what? Creative things. Or you can say that the common elements, common things. Or you can say that unconscious mind. Done. But what about secondary imagination? Secondary imagination is difficult to understand actually. Secondary imagination, you know, everyone doesn't have that sixth sense. Everyone doesn't have that, you know, extremely powerful sixth sense. Like, if I give an example, have you seen those who are the leaders of the country? They can exactly assume, they can exactly, you know, think like, what's going to happen next? Have you noticed that? The greatest leaders, or even there are some people who can tell you exactly what will happen next. How do they do that? With their sixth sense. And the sixth sense is completely dependent on secondary imagination. And the secondary imagination now, the Coleridge, if I say that, it's called poetic faculty. It's called what? Poetic faculty, which is not common. Which is not common. That's called secondary imagination. And this is the most easiest way to understand. Primary imagination is all about like the five senses. You can say that, you know, when I touch it, okay, when I touch it, I can see that the color is what? Blue, and I can touch it, right? With my hand, I can touch it, and I can feel it. So hurt, feelings. I can feel it with my five senses. With my hand, I can feel it. And even with my eyes, I can just see it. But the secondary imagination is something that doesn't deal with that only the things that exist on the earth. Secondary imagination also deals with the things that do not belong to this earth, but they are also dealing with the unnatural things that do not exist, that doesn't exist on this earth. Something beyond that. And only the poetic genius, they can have this secondary imagination. It's not common at all. You get me? So the primary imagination, like if I give you an example, so you are studying Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So it means that you are not the students of primary imagination. You people are the students of secondary imagination, because you are different than other students. Now what is fancy? I'll give you really good ideas about the secondary imagination. Don't worry, let me get back to this idea. What is fancy? And Coleridge is really interesting. He's saying, fancy is something that, that deals with the fact, the common intellectual ability of common people. That is called fancy. Like it says that, what is the fancy? If I give you an example, like the common dream is called fancy. Or if I say that, in literature we use what? Metaphors. We use what? Metaphors. We use what? Simile. These are all things, like, if I say that my love is like red, red rose, I can say that, easily, like, well, I love you I love you a lot, but still I'm saying my love is like red, red rose. Why? Because I want to make it fanciful. Right? So these are the things that the poet uses, but these are the common things that everyone can use it. But this secondary imagination, not everyone can use it. And he gives you the elements of secondary imagination. Now write it down. And we're going to get back to physics. Write it down. Diffuse. Write down diffuse. If I don't forget. Diffuses, dissolves. Are you writing it down?
Yes, sir.
These are the elements of whom? Secondary imagination. Diffuses, dissolves, and then it's like called dissipates. 3Ds. Done? Okay. So if I come with this one, it's called what? Dissolves. Now why is he using this dissolve? Now if I just go for an experiment with you, that's why I just got something for you. So if I give you the water. So if I just use this water, the water is drinkable. I'm not going to waste the product. So now this is what? Now look at this one. If I just, so I'm just giving it here. Look what's happening. It's called dissolving. It's called what? The elements were there, right? The small particles, and it's getting dissolved with what? Water. It's dissolving. This is what dissolving is. So when he says that it's called dissolving, it dissolves, meaning that in the secondary imagination, that imagination when it comes, it dissolves with everything. It dissolves with the normal things, like in the earth. Like staying on the earth, you can smell some unnatural, like when we say that, I see a red ghost, I see a white ghost. So now you are trying to dissolve that white ghost with what? Primary imagination. It's called dissolving. Now if I call that dissipate, what's that? Dissipate. Dissipate is in physics, it's called what? Look, it's called hot water, right? The water is extremely hot here. Okay. But when I keep the hot water in a cup, after a certain moment it becomes what? Cold. It means that it calls dissipate means the power, the energy that's going to lose. When it was hot, the energy was there, right? But it's getting lost, right? That's called dissipate. Understand? It's something like the decay of the energy. The decay of what? Energy. And now you come for the diffuses. Diffuses is really interesting. Like movement of the substances from high portion to low portion. Like if I just throw something, okay, if there are so many stones, like imagine that I have so many, like I have 100 stones, right? And there is a bucket, and I'm just keeping one by one. The first one will be the last one, right? Will be the beneath, it will be in the bottom of the pot. Why? It's something like the substance, or even in the heat. Even if you're giving heat or energy somewhere, you find that the particles, the high particles, where it was really in the first slot, it's getting into the last slot. That's called what? Diffuses. Or you can say the substance. What is the meaning of substance? It's a matter, it's an object. Okay, the movement of the substance from high to low. Movement of the substance from high to low. That is called what? Diffuses. Now, the question is that why is he using this kind of terms just to describe the secondary imagination? Because the imagination is kind of like diffuses. Like sometimes it's so high that you start to, like people when they start to, they take alcohol or they take drugs, what happens to them? They diffuses. They diffuse. They start to diffuse, and then if you come to dissolve, the imagination start to dissolve with everything, and it's also dissipate. At first you find that it's so high, then it starts to fall. The energy starts to lose. If you think of a drunk, when he starts to, he'll be saying, every nonsense thing, right? But after a certain moment, you find what? It's absolutely cool. So that's why he's saying that the secondary imagination is so powerful that, it comes with, it diffuses, it dissolves, and it dissipates. Simple. So when we are reading the poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, we'll find the existence of ghost. We'll find the existence of what? Ghost. So if you're seeing a ghost, now you start to think like, does ghost exist? That is the question, right? That is the question. Do we believe that ghost exists?
Yes.
No. In primary imagination, we don't believe the ghost exists because with our 5 senses, we cannot feel it, touch it, or even we can't see it. Right? So, but the secondary imagination makes us believe that what? Ghosts exist. Are you clear? So the secondary imagination takes you somewhere that start to deal with the non-existent thing that you cannot grab with your 5 senses, and you start to grab with your 6 senses. That's why the secondary imagination, according to Coleridge, is so powerful. And the secondary imagination doesn't belong to everyone. It's not a piece of cake for everyone. It's only given to those people, those who are genius, those who got rid of this fancy. They're not fanciful. They're someone different. And the primary imagination, every one of you, can you write poems? Every one of you cannot write poems. Can you? I can write poems. So it means what? To write poems, you need to go where?
Secondary imagination.
So which imagination is powerful?
Secondary imagination.
Everyone, is it done? Clear? So now if I just go for the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, so this poem, why we are dealing with this thing? Because Coleridge will take you from primary imagination to secondary imagination. It's a poem of more than 700 lines. And it's a story basically. It's a story of everything. It's a story of love. It's a story of sin. It's a story of redemption. It's a story of sacrifice. It's a story of like seeing ghosts. It's a story of like someone from back calls me. Okay? So this is going to be a hilarious story. So we're going to read that the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, but not today. Can you stop the recording? Thank you.